All right, everyone. Yesterday you had that major press conference with Huckabee Sanders coming out to talk to the press, and Bolton was there. The U.S. has withdrawn from a long-standing treaty that it had with the nation of Iran. Basically, the neocon con job idea as well. Iran is not supposed to act in an unkind manner. They're being mean to us, by launching a few missiles and saying mean stuff that they've been saying for half a century. It couldn't be because Uncle Sam overthrew their legitimately elected sovereign government a long time ago and then did it again. And then tried to do it again. It couldn't have anything to do with it. There's no bad blood because of, our actions. It's all on them because Rouhani or something. When I look at Iran, I approach it with skepticism towards Uncle Sam's apparent long-term objective of destroying the nation of Persia, which is basically what it is geographically. A nation that doesn't really operate in an aggressive capacity. Like the only recent conflict there being basically in Syria trying to back Assad's regime. They've got Russia's backing on that, at least tacitly. What I would say is this, though. I actually support withdrawing from this treaty. I say this as someone, I do not want to invade Iran. I don't care what Iran does. I don't feel threatened by Iran. I'm certainly not war hawking after Iran, and I'm skeptical that Trump's exportation of a very successful policy in Korea to Iran will be helpful. That being said, though, if war breaks out, if there's a diplomatic problem, I want to know exactly who's to blame. I want it to be my own government taking its lumps from the population, like with Obama in Syria. Towards, I think it was in the second to last year of his ignominious regime. What ended up happening was he wanted to strike Assad. He's like, well, maybe I'll just fire a couple missiles over there. No war, just I want to bomb a few Assad targets because he did the chemical weapons thing. And of course, later we found out that our hunch was right, and the official UN report said, well, we can't establish it was Assad this time. We don't even know that for certain. He wanted to strike Assad. He was told no by the American people. The House overwhelmingly was like, no, if you bring it before a vote, we're going to reject it. Obama came out and did polling at the time, figured it was unpopular, and so once he saw how unpopular the idea was, he said, oh, by the way, I need to get the approval of Congress because I don't want to act in a unilateral fashion, even though because of various bills that have already been passed, the president has the ability to conduct limitless warfare now. He shouldn't. A president should have to go before Congress and get war declared in order to conduct any form of informal combat operations. Combat war, fucking give it whatever newspeak label you want. Family-friendly drone invasion. Say what you want. It's still an act of war. If you're bombing another country, what we're doing like in Yemen and Syria and Pakistan and Afghanistan is a war. It's a war. A very expansive, silent world war is going on right now. I happen to oppose it. I think it's unhelpful. I think it generates more terrorism over time. We should be thankful there aren't 10 times as many terrorist attacks in Europe at this point, simply because of all the bad blood and ire that's being drawn, especially by France, I would say. And as far as this particular Treaty of Amity, what this does is exonerates the U.S. government. See, this is prefaced on the UN basically saying the U.S. is in breach of this treaty where by some of these sanctions. You must remove certain sanctions on Iran. They violate the treaty. The U.S. government has said, well, fuck you. Then we just won't be part of the treaty. We're not giving you the right to legislate for us. I support that. I don't support globalism. The UN is corrupt. And again, if there's warmongering, I want to know who to blame for it. I don't want to have to go through 10 steps of bureaucracy to find out which fucking UN sub-official green-lighted some bullshit sanction or treaty or agreement or paper or something. That's the way the EU works. That's why nobody can ever get anything accomplished in Western Europe. Too much bureaucracy. The buck stops here. Make sure that Trump is the one who is either applauded when something goes right with regards to foreign policy from the US standpoint, or he gets chastised, he takes the blame if something goes wrong. Like he gets credit in North Korea. He sends Pompeo over there. He's gone to a summit. He's the one directing that activity as the head diplomat, essentially, of the United States, the head representative, one of the biggest presidential roles. Simply shake people's hands, eat the caviar, talk to people, and smoke a cigar. Do whatever you need to do. Drink vodka with Vladimir Putin. I know Trump supposedly has been a teetotaler and never even tried alcohol. I'm not sure if I 100% believe that, although he's obviously not a drunken individual, despite what some of his enemies may think. Remember when they were trying to say that he was a coke snorter? Remember when Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia, came out to say that, oh yeah, I can tell you right now he's snorting coke up on stage, and then there were like pictures of her coke nail from Star Wars. And it's like, no. Yeah, I love cocaine, but no, that's not a coke nail. I never did that. It's like, come on. Yeah, I mean, he was screwing Harrison Ford at the time. It's like that would have been a match made in geek heaven. Can you imagine if that had been public at the time? You're like, yeah, we're dating. Yeah, for real. In real life, we're going to have like Ewok suits for our babies and shit. I think it would have been funny to see. As far as this agreement goes, though, fuck the agreement. It's like the UN can't stop violence insofar as you attempt to have a global body constraining U.S. policy. What that will inevitably do, because of the composition of the U.S. population, is what it does to other populations. It makes them hate globalism. It makes them hate specifically the so-called benevolent side that was originally intentioned on preventing war. But is that really what's been accomplished? Has the UN prevented a war? No, of course not. The only kind of quasi-globalism that prevented a war was the designing of NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Essentially, the idea that it was too dangerous for them to directly confront one another. That stopped all sorts of possible conflicts while starting proxy wars in non-aligned nations which had weak governments. As far as for the rest of the world, it's like, what does the UN solve? The UN does nothing. Why the fuck should we listen to the UN? I don't even think there should be a UN. It's worthless. It's worthless. The current structure of the UN is bureaucratic, overtly political, carved off into little blocks of countries that largely ignore the UN anyway. Like the UN saying, okay, we won't officially ignore you, we'll just tear up the treaty. Okay, no more violation. Then you have nations that do ignore the UN. China ignores the UN all the time. North Korea used to do it. Now they're kind of not. Israel ignores the UN. Israel is sort of like North Korea in the diplomatic sense. You've got a small nation of strategic and no other real importance, rogue nuclear state, non-signee of the NPT, gets its way more often than not with its main backer, US for Israel, China for North Korea, simply because it happens to pose a regional threat to stability, specifically because of warmongering. Netanyahu uses the threat of war as a constant campaign tactic. Not saying that others in the region don't do the exact same thing. Of course they do. But it's very funny to see them claim to be the only democracy in the Middle East. Until recently, I used to say it was Turkey. Then Erdogan decided to basically destroy their republic. Now it's Egypt. Or Iraq. I hate to say it, but Iraq is looking like a beacon of stability now. They're like trying to rebuild like Babylon and shit practically. You see that one city that U.S. investors have, propped up. They're building a bunch of commie blocks, but ultimately it looks like it's pretty cool. It looks like they're going to have their own miniaturized version of like Dubai in the middle of the fucking desert, like I think south of Baghdad. But no, I have nothing against Iran, but this treaty is not going to protect them anyway. Look, it's another one of these treaties where the president can just tear it up. It's like, yeah, wasn't duly passed on our end. It's just an informal agreement as far as we're concerned. Fuck off. We're not going to listen to the global order. Trump has said we're no longer going to march to the false song of globalism. I happen to agree with him on that. I think we should have great relations with Iran, but let's hash that out between our two respective nations outside of the UN. Because the UN will just take sovereignty from us and from Iran and impose upon us. That's the problem of globalism. That's about all. Peace out.